Story time about the girl who tried to talk me into doing the nasty with her dad. Literally. So a little background information. 2 months before this whole situation, I had met her through one of my friends at a party. She was really funny, really nice. We're gonna call this girl Jessie. So when my friend and I left the party, I had asked her about Jessie, and she was like, oh, I wouldn't really hang around her. She's just like a really weird person. Now, I didn't really take my friend's word for it, mainly because in the past, my friend has gotten really jealous whenever I've started hanging out with other people. So I decided to find out for myself. Which now I realize that was probably not one of my best ideas. So a few weeks later, we hung out with her again, and I got her number that night. Her and I started hanging out a lot. And her and I were both seniors in high school. Well, when I would go over to her house, her dad would be super weird around me. He would just be very overly nice and touchy with me. And her mom and her dad were divorced. Well, the one night I'm sitting in Jessie's room and she comes upstairs and she's like, OMG, I have to tell you what my dad said. Like for part 2. Okay, part 2 about the girl who tried to talk me into doing the nasty with her dad. Literally. Like I said, she comes upstairs to her bedroom and she's like, OMG, I have to tell you what my dad just said about you. And she would literally do this all the time. She would be like, oh, my dad just said that you're so pretty, or my dad just said that if you were his age, he would totally date you. And just like super weird things like that. Well, I was like, oh, like what did he say? And she was like, OMG, I feel so weird telling you. Like I really don't want to tell you. She was like, I feel like you'll think he's weird. Low-key, she didn't know that I already thought that he was weird. But I was like, oh, okay. She was like, okay, fine, I'll just tell you. My dad said that he would totally fuck you. And I was like, oh, that's really gross. Like, he's really fucking weird for that. And she was like, no, you should totally do it. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, that does not make me feel comfortable. And she was like, dude, you don't understand. He'll pay you. And her dad was super rich, like he owned 4 of his own companies and everything. But still, that was not enough to bribe me to do it with this man. So I grabbed my stuff and I am like about to walk out of her room. And she's like, wait, no, don't go. Like I was just joking. And I was like, no, I'm still gonna leave. And she was like, no, please, please, please don't. Like, how are you gonna get home? I'm not driving you. So I start walking down the stairs and I stop and look into the living room and I see her dad laying naked on the couch, just watching the stairs. It's like he was literally waiting for me to come down here to do the nasty with him. So I start running out the door and her dad chases me and he's like, hey, like, where are you going? What's wrong? And I'm like covering my eyes. I turn around and I'm like, you're what's fucking wrong. You're so fucking gross. After that, she texted me begging me not to tell anybody, and I don't really see her anymore except for when we go to parties and she just happens to be there. Story time about how my boyfriend found out that I was cheating on him with his best friend. So a little background information. We're gonna call my boyfriend Tyler. Tyler and I had been dating since he was 16 and I was 13. And now it was my freshman year in high school and his senior year. And we're gonna call his best friend Jaden. Now there was one really big problem with Tyler and I's relationship. I was pretty much dating Jaden too. Now if you don't get what I mean by that, Jaden was there for literally every single thing that we did in our relationship. Anytime I would invite Tyler over, guess who was walking in right behind him? Jaden. Anytime that Tyler and I went on dates, guess who was there? Jaden. And there wouldn't even be another girl there. He would literally just third wheel on our dates. And I talked to Tyler about it before and he's like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. He's my best friend. So fast forward, the one day Tyler and Jaden are both over my house, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that I was cheating on him with his best friend. So like I said, Jaden and Tyler are both at my house, and Tyler ends up getting a call, and it was his mom telling him that his brother had just passed away. So Tyler told Jaden that he needed to find a ride home, and after that Tyler left immediately. Now me, I do not know what the hell to do, because Jaden and I had never been left alone before, and it wasn't really because Tyler didn't trust us. It was more of though we didn't really have a reason to be alone together. So that night he was supposed to wait for my parents to get home so that way they could drive him. But I ended up getting him an Uber because he said that he liked me and I did not know what to do. Fast forward, while my boyfriend is in the grieving stages, I was messing with his best friend behind his back. And the one day he had walked in on us doing spicy things. And after, he had his whole family posting things about me on Facebook saying that I was a whore and everything. Story time about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So a little background information. I was 18 at the time and a freshman in college. My uncle was a National Guard, and we were the same age, we went to the same school, and we also had the same friends. And while he was away, I had made one friend that he didn't know about. Her and I became best friends, we got into the same college, and we were in the same dorm room together. Well, the one day my uncle came to my college to surprise me. I ran up to him, I gave him a big hug, and my best friend was super confused because I had never introduced them. And when I introduced them, there was this weird, awkward vibe. So all three of us went back to the dorm room, and I asked her if it was okay that he spent the night, because I didn't want to be that person to just invade her space. So she ended up saying yes, and eventually we all got really hungry, and we all wanted Chick-fil-A, so I went and I left them all alone in the room together. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So like I said, I went to go get us Chick-fil-A and I left them in the dorm all alone together. While I was waiting in line, I called them to ask what they wanted and nobody answered the phone. So I was like, okay, whatever, it's fine. They're probably just busy talking. So I low-key took a long time because I went to the grocery store to get some cookies. I was just craving them. So then I get back to the dorm room. As soon as I open the door, I see both of them unclothed on top of each other on the bed, doing the nasty. So for some reason, I had a broom and I threw it at my uncle and I went to my friend's apartment that night. And when I told my mom about it, she said that it was my fault because weirdly enough, they praised all the boys in my family. Story time about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So a little background information. There was this boy and we're going to call him John. John and I knew each other through one of our mutual friends. Well, 24/7, John would post sad quotes on his Snapchat story because him and his girlfriend had just broken up. So I decided that I was going to be Captain Save-A-Ho and be there for him, telling him it was okay and that everything happens for a reason. Well, eventually John had developed a huge crush on me. Like, he would flirt with me 24/7, sending me all these cute emojis. And of course, my dumbass fell for it. So after talking for a little bit, him and I started dating. Well, the one day I was on Snapchat going through his story, and he was posting a bunch of funny memes on his story, and I was just laughing until I got to the last thing that he posted on his story. It was this picture of a baby girl saying, "I can't wait to meet you from Dada." So with my crazy ass, I jumped on the phone and started cussing him out. And then he goes, "What are you talking about? That's my little sister." Like for part 2. Part 2 about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So like I said, when I confronted him about it, he said that it was a picture of his baby sister. Always with the Alabama shit, for what reason, I don't know. But he calls me the next day and he starts apologizing about everything. And then he decides to make a new Snapchat account and starts talking to me on there, thinking that I was just gonna block his other account. He posts a picture of his baby mama. So at this point, my Virgo self and I were done with the bullshit. By the way, he's a Gemini, so if that doesn't explain it, I don't know what will. So I start dating my new man, and I commented on all of his posts. I guess I'm not surprised she's not the only bitch you're fucking with. And if you try lying, I'm going to spill the tea. Like, I just think that it's really funny how females just think that their men are so loyal, even when you literally expose their man with every piece of evidence. Well, the girl who sent this in has a special message for all of us. I promise you that men ain't shit. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Story time about why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So a little background information. In my town, on the 15th of June this year, 2 girls got kidnapped in my hometown. So I kind of knew these 2 girls. I mean, they went to my school, but that was really it. Because low-key, I didn't want to be friends with them, and I kind of hated them. They were in 7th grade, I was in 8th grade, so they were probably like a year younger than me. Anyway, so it was a Wednesday, and the last time they had been seen was at 8 p.m. with a 30-year-old man. They were supposedly doing drugs outside of a McDonald's. Well, I guess this man saw that they had been doing drugs, and he wanted some. Before that, I guess he kind of eased into the question because he was like talking to them, getting to know them, and I guess he thought he had a really good shot at getting some drugs. But when he asked, they said no. So then he asked a few more times and they finally gave them to him, but whenever they got closer, he grabbed both of them, put him in his van, and drove off. And he hid them in his house. Like for part 2. Part 2 of why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So like I said, he asked for them again, and finally the girls decided to give him some. But when they got closer, he grabbed both of them and shoved them in his van, drove off. Well, he ended up driving to his house and decided to hide them there. Well, one of the girls' aunts posted something on Facebook saying that both of them were missing, and soon the news made an article that literally said, "Drug addict and her friend gets kidnapped." They went missing for like 6 days, and on the 22nd of June, they were found, but now they won't stop bragging about how fun it was to get kidnapped. And that is why, still to this day, I absolutely despise these girls. Story time about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So we're gonna call my best friend Joey. Joey and I had been best friends since we were 4 years old, and my family was really close with his, and vice versa. And she had always been really nice to him. Of course, because he was a family friend and he was my best friend. Well, one day I thought that she liked him a little bit more than she liked me. She would always ask the weirdest questions. Like, oh, is Joey single? Or what's Joey's sexuality? Like, sis had a whole ass husband. But at the time I didn't think anything of it because I just thought that she really wanted him and I to date. But when he turned 15, things started getting a little bit weirder. Like, sometimes he would go over my house right after school, even when I wasn't there, to hang out with my mother. And usually the only time he was at the house was whenever him and I were hanging out. Well, the one day I walked in and they were both sitting on the couch talking. And when they both saw me, they acted like nothing was wrong with it, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So like I said, the one day I come home after school and they're both sitting on the couch already talking. And they look at me and say hi as if nothing was wrong with the situation. And then after that, Joey started mentioning how my mom was so hot. And I was like, yeah, no, she's pretty, but that's it. Well, the one day my mom left for work earlier than she usually does. So I messaged my dad and asked him if he wanted to hang out. So of course he said yes, and 5 hours later I came home and I go upstairs. And I'm just like hearing things from my mother's bedroom. So I go up and I open the door. And because I don't want this video to get taken down, you guys probably can guess what I saw. So I ran out of the room, ran downstairs. I start panicking. And Joey came and hugged me and said, I'm sorry, me and your mom just love each other. So I told them both they were absolutely disgusting. So then my mom starts crying and begging me to forgive her. And now I live with my dad. Story time about why I will never ever ride in an Uber ever again. So a little background information. I was 16 and in 11th grade. So my parents decided to go away for the weekend. They wanted to go and visit some family who lived like 2 hours away. So I decided that it was a good idea to invite my friends and my boyfriend and his friends over for a sleepover. And once we were all at my house, we realized that we were pretty bored, so we decided to go to the fair. So we decided to go to the fair around 9:15. But because we were all lazy AF, we decided to just get an Uber to the fair instead of driving. The Uber there was fine. We went, we had a super great time, and then it was time to go home. It said our Uber was going to come at 10:30, but instead it came at 10:45, which I didn't think was a big deal because Ubers are late sometimes. So we all got into the Uber, and mind you, my house was literally 15 minutes away. So I ended up taking a nap because I was really tired, and then I woke up, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never ever ride in an Uber ever again. So like I said, my house was only 15 minutes away, so since I was really tired from the fair, I decided to take a nap. Well, I woke up 20 minutes later and we were in the middle of nowhere. Like when I tell you, we were on a road that literally just kept on going. I asked my boyfriend where we were and he said that we had been on this road for a while. So at this point, we're all texting each other and all of our friends are saying, no, we're fine. This is the way. So then I look up my address on Google Maps and we are 45 minutes away from my house. So then I send it in the group chat and now everybody starts to freak out. Not to mention our Uber driver was on the phone the whole time, but he had his AirPods in and we couldn't understand anything that he was saying. So that's when my friend Sophie, she was in the front seat. She shoved the directions in his face and was like, I think you're going the wrong way. So then he busts a U-turn and he's yelling at this point on the phone. And an hour later, we make it back to my house. I have a feeling if it wasn't for my friend Sophie, we wouldn't have made it out of there. Story time about my toxic best friend group. So a little background information. I was 16 and it was the end of 9th grade going into summer break. And one day randomly these 3 girls added me on Snapchat and put me into a group chat. Now I had seen them around school but I never said hi to them. I was finding it very hard to make friends in 9th grade because everybody was so toxic. Anyways, like I said, they added me to a group chat and all of them said hi to me. And usually I wouldn't respond to random people on Snapchat, but because I had seen them around school, I decided why not. And it was so random. They just started sending pictures of themselves into this group chat. And it low-key made me feel bad because I kind of hated my physical appearance. But anyways, they asked me if I wanted to be friends with them. Oh, and by the way, their names were Stacy, Savannah, and Emily. So of course I said yeah because it was hard for me to make friends. So fast forward, my birthday was coming up. So they asked me if we could hang out. They said they wanted to give me an early birthday present. So I said yes, of course. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my toxic friend group. So like I said, they asked me if we could hang out to give me an early birthday present. So I said yeah. And Emily had a pool at her house, so they asked me if I wanted to go over there. And of course I said yeah, it was summertime and it was hot outside. Well, when I got there, they asked me to order the pizza and they said that I had to pay for it. So I said yeah, because they were my besties at the time. So I used some of my birthday money to pay for the pizza for all of us. And when I got back to Emily's house, they were all already in the pool. So I was kind of mad. 1, because they didn't go with me, and 2, they were just hanging out without me. So we're sitting there eating the pizza. And then after, all 3 of them get in the pool and they start taking pictures with each other, not even asking me to be in any pictures. So at that point, I was so annoyed. I was just like, you guys are being so rude. And Emily's like, what are you talking about? We didn't even do anything. And then, of course, Stacy and Savannah agreed. So I was like, 1, you didn't even ask me to be in any pictures and you made me pay for the pizza for all of us. And she was like, you're ugly. We didn't want you in the pictures. So I threw the pizza away and went home. Story time about how I was almost kidnapped. So a little background information. I was 13 and it was the summer going into 9th grade. I was on a road trip with my family and we needed to stop for some gas. So we stopped at some random gas station and we see this lady get out of her car and walk in. No big deal though. So we're inside and we're waiting in line to use the bathroom. So we were in the front of the line and then that lady was behind us and then there were a few people behind her. So as we're standing in line, she FaceTimes some guy and then she starts pointing the camera at people around the store and she would be like, oh, do you like this? And he would say yes or no. Well, then she points the phone at me. And then he goes, yeah, that's the one. And my mom and I were super creeped out about this because she was being super loud and she was taking a really long time at this gas station. So my mom goes into the bathroom and then she starts to talk to me. She starts asking how old I am, where I'm from, and if my mom and I were here with anybody else. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was almost kidnapped. So like I said, she starts to talk to me and ask me super personal questions. And I'm being vague about everything that I possibly can be. So I go in, I use the restroom after my mom. We grab some snacks and then she follows us around the whole store. And she didn't even use the bathroom. So we leave the store and we saw the car that she got out of and it was parked right next to our car. When originally it was parked all the way across the parking lot. And I'm guessing the man who she was on FaceTime with was in the car. And he was sitting right where my car door was. So my mom and I decided to walk around a little bit and this lady is just following behind us the whole time. So we call my dad who was across the street at another store. We told him about the situation so he comes and picks us up and then he sees the car pick the lady up and they start following us. So then they followed us for about 25 to 30 freaking miles and then they ended up turning off on some random road. And I have a feeling if my mom and I didn't pay such close attention to what they were doing, I would have been kidnapped and trafficked. Story time about how I caught my grandma with my dad. So a little background information, I was 16 and it was the first day of 11th grade. Well, my friend wanted me to come to the mall with her after school that day. She was like, screw your grandma's birthday, just come to the mall with me. So the plan was I would sneak onto my best friend's bus after school and skip my grandma's birthday. By the way, my grandma was low-key a hoe. Like half of her kids won't even bring their husbands around her because after she got their numbers, she would end up sending nude pictures to them. Anyway, so the end of the day rolls around and I go to my locker to get my book bag when I'm called down to the office. So I go down to the office and my mom is there to pick me up because she said that we needed to do a few things before our grandma's party. Well, my grandma was at our house getting ready and my mom forgot her wallet at home, so when we went back home, I went to go put my book bag in the house. When I walk in and I see my grandma and dad on the couch, and I'm not even gonna say what they were doing, and my mom is walking past them like she didn't see anything. So after that, I called one of my aunts and asked if I could stay with her for a while, and now I don't talk to any of them. Story time about how my stepmom got with my boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 18 and it was my senior year of high school. And my mom and my dad got a divorce whenever I was 11 years old. My dad moved to a whole other state. My sister went with him and then my brother and I stayed with my mom. Because my mom said it was a time where we need our mom in our lives. But to be honest, I think she just wanted child support. Anyways, after elementary school, I moved back in with my dad. And at the time, he was dating this woman who we're going to call Carol. And she was like the sweetest girl I'd ever met. I actually called her mom even though they weren't married because I was so close to her. So fast forward, they get married. I'm super happy for them. My senior year of high school, I start dating this guy named Paul. Well, since I was close with Carol, I told her about him first. After a while of him and I dating, she suggested that he should come over for dinner. So I ended up inviting him to this party that my dad hosts every year. And I was super excited. Well, I see him and Carol talking, and I'm super happy because I want him to get along with my family. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my stepmom got with my boyfriend. So like I said, I invited my boyfriend to this party that my dad hosts every year, and he starts talking to Carol, which I was super happy about because I wanted him to get along with my family. Well, during the party, him and Carol go missing for like half an hour. And there were a ton of people there, and my dad's house was big as fuck. So I was like, okay, maybe he got lost. So finally I find him, and then I asked him where he had been. Then he said that he went to the bathroom, which was extremely weird because I had already showed him where the bathrooms were on the first floor whenever he came to the party. So I was like, whatever. And then Carol came downstairs, but I didn't really think anything of it. Fast forward, I was on my way home from this tutoring class. My friend was driving me because I didn't have a car. But we get home and we hear loud moaning noises all the way outside, and I see Paul's car in my driveway. And I was like, well, it can't be my dad because he's out of town. So I go in, I catch them, I ask them how long it's been going on. They say since the party. So I tell my dad about it, he gives her a second chance, and then I move back in with my mom.
See, what pisses me off is this video was a joke, but those comments and the subsequent likes they received are not. Men really expect to do absolutely nothing and you to be on your fucking knees.
That video made me think of a time when I had a really awkward date when I was younger, and so I'm just gonna make a story time about it, and it's probably gonna have a lot of parts, so sit down and grab some popcorn and get comfortable. Ignore the fact that I look like shit because it is finals week. So when I was 18, I had an online friend, and we knew each other for like over a year, and he lived like 40 minutes away, so it wasn't too far. But every time he would ask to hang out, I was just like, no, you know, I'm busy, I got things to do. And after like a year of just hanging out and playing games, he asked me again to hang out, and I was like, okay, whatever. He texts me and he's like, guess what, G, I have $70 for us to spend when we hang out. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, great, he's gonna pay for the date, hang out, whatever. So I drove 40 minutes to go pick him up because he didn't have a car, and then I drove another 30 minutes out to take us to like this Red Robin, and it was so awkward. Like, he did not talk at all. He barely said anything. Anytime I tried to talk, he barely said anything. So like, we order our food, we eat. He sneaks a picture of me and is like, haha, on a date or whatever. And I was like, not really a date, we're just hanging out, but okay, whatever. So then the check comes, and I'm over here expecting that he's gonna grab it. He doesn't fucking grab it. We're talking about something, and I notice he's not grabbing the check, and then I asked him a question. He's like, I don't know. So he reaches to the back of his pocket, and I'm like, thank God he's gonna, you know, pay for the check now. And he pulls out his phone and goes on his phone. So now I'm like, what the fuck do I do? Because I think I was fucking broke at this time, and I was like, what the fuck? He said he was gonna pay for it, kind of, you know, like. So I'm like, oh, so what do you want to do after this? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we should probably get out. I start putting on my jacket to leave, you know, to get up, and he grabs the check, and I'm like, thank God, like, now get out. I start putting on my jacket to leave, you know, to get up, and he grabs the check, and I'm like, thank God, like, now he's gonna fucking pay for the check. Later catches him like halfway while we're getting up, and you know, he's like sorting out the bill. So at this point, I'm like by the door thinking that he's got it covered, and this fool literally, he yells from across the restaurant. He goes, G, am I paying for yours too? When I tell you, my jaw was on the floor. I walked up and I was like, yeah, and he paid for it. The waiter went and got him his change. I think there was like $1 and some change left. This fool took it. This fool took the change, and he didn't even tip the waiter. So it can't get any worse than that, right? You would think that it couldn't get any worse than that, right? Next, we go to Walmart, and I'm grabbing my shampoo and conditioner that I needed, and the whole time he's like hovering super close to me, and he's really tall and like kind of big, but I don't care about that. But like, I just don't like when someone's myself. This is kind of uncomfortable. I want to get out of here. I'm walking to the register, and he's following behind, and he stops and he's staring at this game gift card for the game that we play online, and he's staring at it, and I'm like, are you gonna get it? And he's like, no. And then he looks to me, and he's like, do you want to get it for me? I was like, no. And he put his heavy ass hands on my shoulders, and he was like, but gee, we're best friends. And I'm like, so like, I don't have money, I got bills to pay, I don't have money to buy you stuff, like what the heck? And looking back on it, I feel kind of bad because I understand like we don't have money sometimes, or you know, it's tough sometimes, but don't tell someone that you have a certain amount of money and like make it seem like you're gonna pay for it. And also, don't make someone drive like 40 minutes out to come pick you up and drive you around town to hang out with you then.
My fiancé and I have been together for 6 years and engaged for 3. We decided to wait until I finished with my PhD program for us to get married. I picked a beautiful wedding hall that I was on the waiting list for 3 years to get into. My older sister also got engaged and is planning her wedding 6 months after mine. At our family dinner, she recently revealed that she's pregnant. My sister recently revealed that she was expecting and was going to push her wedding date forward. And she put me on the spot at the table and said, I was really hoping we could take your venue. I really cannot stress myself too much with planning a wedding while going to maternity classes. And I think it's so beautiful and it would really mean a lot to me. I guess everyone is expecting me to say yes, anything for my little sister. And when I looked at her, I had said, I don't know. I have my heart really set on this venue. She started crying and she stormed out of the room. I tried defending myself, but my mom said, you waited 3 years. Would have killed you to wait a few more months? When has your sister ever asked you for something? My fiance is super upset and wants to disinvite my sister. And my family is giving me the cold shoulder. So am I the asshole for not giving her the venue?
After I last spoke to my parents, they did not let go of their position. I was the bad guy. I was responsible for my sister's depression and her failing relationship. It went so far that I had to block them and change my number as they were contacting me from relatives' phones and so on. It was a real bummer, especially during a time that should have been so special. I was harassed by my sister and her entourage on Facebook and Instagram, so I simply deleted it. It was a mentally draining time, but my husband's family and friends helped me get through it. The morning of my wedding was perfect. My bridesmaids and I got ready, we drank some Prosecco, and took pictures in front of the venue. That's when I saw my sister's car approaching the venue. Admittedly, I was shitting my pants, or well, my dress. One of my friends ran inside to get security while my sister was approaching me. She had been angry crying, and as soon as she saw me, she started screaming obscenities. It was as if she was possessed, and at that moment, I couldn't help but to feel pity for her. The earth was a bit muddy, and the next thing that happened really fast. My sister bent down, grabbed a handful of mud, and she was going to throw it at me and my dress. My maid of honor sprinted towards her and pushed her butt first into a bed of flowers. As my sister got back up, the security officer arrived and removed her. And with that, I had enough ammunition to file a restraining order against her. I didn't want to file a police report against her at this point. I just wanted her to stay away from me. The rest of the day was just amazing. I married my best friend, the love of my life, and just my rock. My brother walked me down the altar, and we all cried at the vows. It was spectacular. After coming back from my honeymoon, I decided to look for jobs in a different city. I didn't want to lose my friends, but I just needed a clean break. I got a new job at a university in a bigger city, and we are currently in the process of moving. But maybe the biggest and also the most cliche change is that I'm pregnant. It's a classic honeymoon baby. My sister is still blaming me for her fiance breaking up with her, and she's moved in with my parents and refuses to work. My parents are exhausted, and my sister is acting like a baby. I guess their parenting is catching up with them. I can only say that I'm so happy right now. It hurts having lost family, but at the end of the day, I had to cut them out, and now I have my husband and a honeymoon baby on the way. Oh, and a shiny new backbone. Thank you for everything. My partner of over 3 years has been living with me for the past 18 months. We're in our 30s, happy, and talk about how this is it for us, relationship-wise. There's just one problem. He doesn't want to get married, and I really do. Marriage is important to me. However, after many long discussions, I realized that I love him enough to stay and take marriage off the table, even though I really want it. Now here's the issue. I got paperwork for my insurance a few days ago, and I made a joke about how my parents are going to be really comfortable if I die, especially in an accident, because of my insurance policies and the added accidental death insurance I have. My boyfriend and I got to talking, and he mentioned how I should really change my beneficiary to him. I said no, absolutely not. I told him I would never make anyone who isn't blood or legal family my beneficiary. I said I would add him in the future if one day he decided he wanted to get married, but as it stands now, my insurance will remain as is. I also told him I wouldn't add him to the title of my house without marriage because I bought it before we got together and I own it. Now he thinks that I'm an asshole for holding marriage as a bargaining chip. We don't have to get married, but I'm not comfortable tying my finances to him without it. So am I wrong here? This is why you should be extremely careful when meeting up with someone you met online. When I was 18, I was freshly single and ready to mingle. I had a dating profile on that website, Plenty of Fish. One day I got a message from a guy who was 8 to 10 years older than me. At that time, I didn't care about age, so I messaged back. The initial plan was to meet at the movie theater, but while I was getting ready, he asked if I could come to his apartments and we could go to the theater together. Not thinking much of it, I agreed and headed over. The address he sent me was about 35 minutes out, but I really didn't mind making the drive. On the way there, I had this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I just chalked it up to being nervous. However, the closer I got, the more this feeling grew. You know that feeling when you feel like something really bad's about to happen? When I was about 5 minutes away, I decided to call my best friend and tell her how I was feeling. She told me that if I'm feeling this way, then I probably shouldn't go inside his apartment and that I should text him. When I got there, I parked outside of his apartment building and I shot him a text. I told him I wasn't comfortable coming inside and if we could just meet at the movies. This is when he started flipping out on me. He said I told him I would come inside, so I needed to come inside, and that he was going to come and get me and I had nothing to be afraid of. This is when things got crazy. Part 2 of why you should be careful when meeting up with someone you met online. He kept trying to get me to go inside of his apartment despite me telling him that I wanted to meet at a public place like we originally planned. He told me to stop being weird and to come inside because I was already there. At this point, I went with my gut feeling, apologized, and told him that I didn't want to see him. This is when he went ballistic. He started cursing me out and telling me that I wasted his only day off. He told me he was already on his way outside to come and get me. As I was looking down at my phone and texting him back, someone tried to open my car door from the outside. Luckily, I always keep my doors locked. I looked up and it was him. That's when he told me to open the door and that I was going to come inside with him. I was mortified with shock, so I didn't respond right away. He punched my driver's side window and told me to open the effing door. I immediately started my car and booked it while he was yelling at me. As I was driving home, terrified and trying to catch my breath, he texted me nonstop. He told me that I needed to make this up to him and to meet